Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we've got the Windwalker. We're rolling with the punches, getting these reviews out to you as rapidly as possible. And the main purpose of these videos is to be going over how fun and engaging a specialization is, more or less than just its tuning, right? So I care about the fun of the spec. I know there's another three-letter word that people really only care about, and they tend to correlate with the word fun, or maybe even replace it with the word fun, is one. They just want to play whatever is number one. I need to be the best. That is what is fun to them. I think it is too early on in the beta at the moment to determine whether or not something is actually going to be number one, but I can determine if something's going to be fun to me, engaging and challenging, and I'm not going to be bored out of my skull 3 months from now if I've made an investment into a specialization. And to me, that's the most important factor to it. If I'm playing something that is just it's number one, but I just press one button and it makes me number one, and it's not turning the lights on upstairs for me, that's not what I'm looking for from my gaming experience, at least. I do take into account performance, because it's also equally not fun to never be invited to a group. So if something is just like staggeringly apparent that you'll never get invited, I do make a note of that and try to provide feedback that towards something that would improve it and prevent it from being the case. But at the moment, the main purpose of these reviews is fun. Okay, so in Battle for Azeroth to Shadowlands, the main conversion of your class is not too much. So if you liked Battle for Azeroth, you're going to like Shadowlands Windwalker. It's basically just an enhancement. Expel Harm is coming back baseline here to the class, although potentially nerfed, as the Honor Talent version that was converted over provided Chi. It did percentage-based damage, so it would scale with health increasing effects, and it was overall very powerful. Now, currently, both of them exist in this reality, in this timeline. I don't think that's going to be the case. I would imagine that they remove Reverse Harm, because it seems pointless to have Expel Harm and Reverse Harm, and potentially if they don't share cooldowns, it could create some degenerate gameplay where you're just mashing between the two of them. So I would imagine that Reverse Harm ends up getting removed, but at the moment, it's still there. Touch of Death is now just a flat out execute. It's not going to be scaling with how much damage you pump into it. So it could be, in a way, a little bit less predictable, but it's more like transferring it being predictable in another way. If you get really low health, you know you're gonna die. But instead of it being like, oh, it's about to explode, time to activate something to reduce damage in PvP, right? And then in PvE, it gives you a little bit of an execute phase. As an advantage, or maybe potentially as a trade-off, Invoke Zwen is back. Tony the Tiger, if you want to call in your favorite breakfast cereal to do battle, it is now baseline. You don't need to be worrying about picking talents and, more importantly, losing hit combo, because it's basically mandatory to the spec in a lot of cases. You're getting Tony the Tiger back, so for those massive AoE windows as a secondary cooldown, which is awesome. I loved Zwen on my Windwalker. More notably, I played a lot of Windwalker in Legion, not a lot in Battle for Azeroth, honestly. And I missed Strike of the Windlord. That was my favorite ability back in Legion. It's still not here in Shadowlands, but I can complain about it. Fortify and Brew is now baseline, so you get a cooldown to just increase your maximum health and reduce damage taken. Obviously, will scale well with dealing increased damage on Touch of Death, so it still has modifiers there, but you won't have any modifiers with Reverse Harm if it gets removed anymore, but still there as an option. And generally speaking, the only other change to the baseline kit was that Azerite Traits now a talent, replacing Zwen. Dance of Chi Ji, suspending Chi has a chance to make your next spinning crane kick free. However, remember, in Shadowlands, this is like a main component of the expansion, is that abilities that hit all targets are now being limited down to three to six usually, and spinning crane kick is one of those, now being limited down to 6 targets. So will amplifying that damage when it's limited be worth it comparatively to when you could pull the entire dungeon and stun it? It could be a significant downside to the specialization. As it stands right now, Fist of Fury is still uncapped. It's all targets in front of you, which could lead to Windwalkers being a priority depending on how dungeon pathing turns out. And based on my observations of specializations, it seems like they really don't want you to pull the entire dungeon, stun it, and kill it all in 3 seconds. It would seem like that when they're reducing all the spells to be, you only hit 3 things, you only hit 5 things. It seems like they really want to have trash mobs engage you, whereas now it would be like crowd control 1, pull the other two, focus interrupts on the third one, maybe move out of a mechanic of the other one that's left over. To me, they want to change how trash engages with the dungeon group. And if it ends up not being about just AoEing down things as hard as possible, maybe Windwalker struggles a bit because that's what it's really good at, is just AoEing a ton of mobs in front of it. It still does have nice disruption with leg sweep, with paralyze as guaranteed instant crowd control, ring of peace to bounce targets around. So it still does have utility. And you've obviously got mystic touch. You just got 5% physical damage buff. So depending on which class ends up being number one, if it's a rogue or a warrior and they scale off physical damage, they're going to want you as kind of like their little pocket Windwalker that buffs their damage. So you'll always kind of be the Robin to the Batman. At least, right, in terms of getting invited to a group. But no new exciting honor talents to really golf at. Not really anything else when it comes to the talents of the baseline abilities. That's pretty much it. But now when it does come to the new stuff, if you haven't heard of this word a billion times yet, moving to Shadowlands, Covenants! Covenants. This is the biggest decision you're going to make of your entire life. More important than who you're going to marry. More important about what house you're going to buy. More important than what car you're going to get. It's the Covenant abilities and the Covenants themselves, as this is likely to be a very annoying process if you want to change, much like getting a divorce would be, or trying to sell a used car after it's depreciated a lot. You're going to want to make sure that you make a good choice early on. And for the Kyrians, your Covenant spell is Weapons of Order. For the next 30 seconds, your mastery is increased by 10%. So hit combo, that wax on, wax off. Never cast the same ability twice in a row. You don't wax on, wax on. You don't wax off, wax off. You wax on and wax off. So that's always been core to the Windwalker in its gameplay. It's what makes it unique to all the other melee DPS. This synergizes with that, and it already stands out as being probably something that you would want to take. The effect towards Windwalkers, Rising Sun Kick's cooldown is reset instantly, and your Rising Sun Kick reduces the cost of your chi abilities by 1. This is really awesome. Just immediately reset your cooldowns, get a massive increase of damage based on your hit combo and your mastery. It just seems really solid overall. You get the Steward still for the Vial and extra healing. On top of your healing elixirs, you get more healing elixirs. Some of the other passives to consider with PvP is you get stun reductions and polymorph reductions from standing still with Mechanicos. As one of the soulbind options. You also get Pelagos, which synergizes well with your hit combo. It seems like to me that this is just the best overall Windwalker pick. It's just solid across the board. It seems safe in all situations. PvE, raid, dungeon, PvP. It seems fun. It seems like it works well with how the class is built. So it's a solid pick in my mind. The Venthyr Monk Covenant ability, which is the Fallen Order. You open a mirror for the next 24 seconds, summoning reflections of your Orders Fallen of the Ox, Crane, and Tiger. So tank damage healing every 1 second for 6 seconds. Fallen Monks of the Ox will cast Breath of Fire and assist for an additional 2 seconds. Fallen Monks of the Crane will cast Enveloping Mist. So in PvE, unless they scale these to all do the same damage, this one doesn't even do damage. So you could get really unlucky and summon one that only heals. And I say in PvE that this is a downside because I want my damage. In PvP, you might be really happy that it casted a ton of healing and it saves you, but it's kind of just like an RNG gamble on, wow, I might get this amazing burst potential. What if I get a ton of Tiger style Fists of Fury spamming images? But then in PvP, maybe Breath of Fire doesn't do as much damage, and you're like, wow, I got all Breath of Fire. Or in PvE, mostly enveloping miscasters. I don't want to heal. This one seems fun, and it's still kind of playing off that old Pandaren monk from Warcraft 3 where you'd split off into 3 images, right? I see where it's coming from fantasy wise, and it looks like fun. But it could have a pretty big downside if you've got bad RNG. Door of Shadows is more mobility. Windwalker is another class where you're just like, do you really need it? You really need it. So, I mean, Door of Shadows isn't lending itself too much to enhancing the downsides of this effect. Perhaps the Conduits will, but Venthyr, it's kind of just middle of the road. I wouldn't say that it's awful, but it's not as outstanding as Kyrian. Necrolord Covenant ability here is Bone Dust Brew. Hurl a brew created from the bones of your enemy at the ground, coating all targets struck for 10 seconds. Your abilities have a 15% chance to light them on fire. Target a second time at 25% effectiveness as shadow damage or healing. So it's heavily RNG based. Your abilities have a 15% chance at 25% of their effectiveness. So this happened on a Tiger's Palm, doesn't matter. If it happened on a Rising Sun Kick, pretty big. If it happened on a bunch of Fists of Fury ticks, pretty big. But 15% chance is really low. In PvE, where this probably averages out and you don't care too much, it might not be a big deal. In PvP, you care a lot. If it ends up not paying out, this is probably even more RNG heavy than the Venthyr one. Or you just run Kyrian and nothing's RNG. That seems pretty good. So as Windwalker, Spinning Crane Kick will also refund 1 chi when striking enemies with your Bone Dust Brew. It's dungeon pulls with trash mobs and good clumped up characters, so maybe in PvP with just like big melee brawls, if you're planning on doing that, this could work. Fleshcraft got nerfed, so you don't get permanent crowd control immunity, which could have saved this kind of lackluster effect. In my mind, it's probably the weakest option overall in the game. And then Fleshcraft with crowd control immunity could have saved it, because that would be a huge bonus in PvP at least, and maybe in PvE as well to avoid some mechanics, but that was nerfed, so this is a really tough one for me to pick as Windwalker, even though I think the Necrolord Covenant is really cool. Moving down to the Night Fae Covenant here, we've got Fae Line Stomp. Strike the ground fiercely to expose a Fae Line, which I assume looks like this, dealing 60% of attack power as nature damage and igniting enemies with Breath of Fire if you're Brewmaster, or healing eyes with Essence Font. We don't care about that. We're talking about Windwalker. And ripping chi and energy spheres out of the ground, so you can get some resource generation from this. Your abilities have a chance to reset the cooldown of Fae Line Stomp while fighting on a Fae Line. Okay, it's, again, you put something on the ground that you need the other monsters or players to stand in to make really work. A lot of Mythic Plus affixes involve the tank needing to move monsters away. A lot of monsters in Battle for Azeroth just seemingly jump to random things and chase random people all the time. And depending on how the trash mobs are going to be in terms of engaging, keeping things still could be a really big problem. It is massively a problem in PvP, especially if enemies can see the Fae Line Stomp, which, I mean, I feel like, why wouldn't you be able to see the Fae Line Stomp? As you can see, any other damaging attack on the ground has massive drawbacks. If you can keep monsters together, could work out really well for like boss fights that have just trash endlessly spawning on top of it, or in PvP where maybe you play with Death Knights and they play with the Necrolord Grippy Grip second hand and they try and hold everything together. Or maybe you play with the Spear of Bastion Warrior. You got to really think about synergies now if you want to make this work with other class Covenant abilities to just hold them in the Fae line. If you can pull off combos like that, then maybe it has potential, but that seems like a really big risk. And they did just nerf the Night Fae Covenant ability, which is basically Shadow Meld. It's not going to do that. So you're not going to get the benefit of being able to pull and then jump into stealth and skip pulls with the Night Fae Covenant, which reduced its effectiveness. You get the Vulpin, but again, mobility for a Windwalker? Do I really need more? I guess, but it's not really lending any favors to the downsides of the effect itself. To me, it seems pretty straightforward that you want Kyrian. It works well with the kit that exists. It's guaranteed damage. I don't see any debate of this. It's good in PvP with some of the soulbind options. It just seems really straightforward that you would want to go Kyrian for your Covenant. When we look at the conduits here, though, it's broken down into potency, it's broken down into endurance and finesse. These are really big words for attack, defend, move things around. That was the best simple version of that word I could come up with. Calculated strikes, spinning crane kicks bonus damage from striking a unique target. With target problem, Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick is increased by an additional 10%. So for some consistent AoE, this could be good. If you're a flip-flopper between PvP and PvE, anything that has spinning crane kick in it, you probably don't want to pay too much attention to, but this could be really good for Mythic Plus trash, so if that's your main focus. Coordinated offensive, when Storm Earth and Fire Spirits fixate on the same target, they deal 10% additional damage. Nice for single target burst. Could be really good for PvP specifically if you want to just focus on single target burst, or if you know a boss fight is only single target. Seems very good. Inner Fury, Fist of Fury's damage is increased by 20%. How can you not like that? That's really easy to read. That is literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, that's straightforward. All right, I want this. Although you only get one of each, so this one's straightforward to get one of this, and then you're gonna have to flip between single target and AoE if you're running a 3 potency soulbind talent tree. Zwen's Bond. Abilities to activate combo strikes, reduce the cooldown of Invoke Zwen the Tiger, and increases damage. And these all scale up, so your Zwen could become super powered. I really like Zwen. So this seems like a good one for me personally. I like Zwen, but this is all number tuning, right? Any one of these could just be, it's just purely parsing which one parses higher. It could come down to, is this one the best AoE one? This is the best single target one. This one, if it lets you line your Zwen up for different phases of a boss, means you get an extra cycle of your Zwen. Those are going to be your choices. In PvP, it's probably whatever ones do the most damage that you're going to want to go for. But there's some nice fun playability in this one to just get more Zwens out. These potency conduits affect your Covenant's specific ability. Weapons of Order's duration is increased, so you get even more benefit from your mastery and your synergy of playing the monk well. Straightforward, simple, and it works. For Venthyr, Fallen Order monks deal 20% more damage and healing. Buffs it, but again, the downside is that what if you don't spawn enough of the damage dealing Fallen Order monks and you get too many healing ones when you don't want the healing ones, or you get the tank ones when you don't want the tank ones. If the tank ones do less damage than the damage ones, could be a big drawback still, and this doesn't really assist with the drawback. It just increases the, if you roll good, it's gonna be really good, and if you roll bad, then it's even worse, sort of, in a way. Bone Dust Brew, shadow damage or healing is increased by 20%. And when Bone Dust Brew deals shadow damage or healing, it reduces its cooldown. Okay, so if this scales up, maybe you could get it to a point where its cooldown is so low. You got to remember that because these scale up and continuously enhance the spell as the expansion goes on. Thinking about the late game, like you made this choice now, but then you leveled it up 3 months later, maybe it ends up working out. This could be a redeeming factor to it. It definitely increases the consistency of it because the flat out ability does more damage. And then you'd reduce the cooldown to roll the chances on it. So the conduit might save it if you were going Necrolord. Way of the Fae. Faeline Stomp deals 10% additional damage. Again, buffing the baseline spell so they don't have to stay in it. Per target, up to a maximum of 50% additional damage. I'm curious how that'll scale up if it's capped at 50%. Maybe it becomes increasingly better as single target, and that's their way of evening it out as the expansion goes on. So these could have potential depending on how these conduits scale. If you're still someone who's like, I need to be a Necrolord or I need to be Night Fae, these conduits at the moment could save it. Your endurance conduits, so again, defense, it's time to block, it's time to live, it's time to dampen when it comes to PvP. Fortifying ingredients. Fortifying Brew grants you a shield of up to 5% of your maximum health. I like my healing on my healing. Grounding Breath. When casting Vivify on yourself, its heal is increased by 10% and it has a chance to refund its cost. Okay. It's a little bit... So in PvE, you're probably almost never casting Vivify, so you don't care. This would just be better if you were going to run an Endurance Conduit, which I don't think you would in PvE. You'd want as many Potency Conduits as possible, especially not healing ones that require you to significantly stop doing damage to cast a heal. But if you're dueling on a monk in PvP and you're avoiding the fight, this could be a good way of picking yourself up consistently. And then Expel Harms healing is increased. Well, that's instant cast healing that you don't have to deal with too much. This seems like you would never go for this. If you're in PvE, you probably get this just straightforward. It's on your cooldown, makes your cooldown better. And then PvP, you'd run this because it's instant cast, which makes it more accessible and practical in PvP use when you're a melee DPS trying to cast heals. This one is probably not going to get too much use. This one's pretty straightforward, and so is a Fortifying Brew. Your Finesse Conduits. These are conduits that provide utility, so moving things around or moving yourself around. Dizzying Tumble. Targets affected by your leg sweep deal 5% less damage for 5 seconds. That's interesting. So that would persist after the stun. That would be some team utility that goes even just beyond stunning the targets, helps your tank out. But on raid boss fights where usually monsters are immune to stuns, not too much value. Lingering Numbness. When paralysis ends, your target's movement speed is reduced by 60%. Nice little snare if you want to use this as crowd control in PvP. In PvE, would you really care? I suppose if it's... if we're thinking about like a Tal Dazar with the gold boss that transfusions, when the ad spawns and moves, you paralyze it, and then when it usually doesn't end because it lasts so long in PvE, like you don't care. Doesn't it last like a minute in PvE? I don't PvE a lot, especially not on Windwalker, but I'm pretty sure it lasts like a minute, so why would you care about slowing it after its effect? This is purely PvP. If you paralyzed maybe a Death Knight chasing your healer, and then they get slowed, but you already have a slow. I don't think it's worth losing a conduit slot for this. Swift Transcendence. Transfer increases your movement speed. You get a little bit of a sprint. I guess this maybe eventually becomes a root, but you still already have a root anyways. So it seems kind of pointless, frivolous. Tumbling technique. Blackout Kick has a 5% chance to grant a charge of roll. That's insane. Just every once in a while, you get an extra roll, and this would likely increase as you rank up. So far, that's sold to me. Maybe it would be a fight between the leg sweep and then a fight between the Blackout Kick, because you don't really care about movement and you already have snares. So this is just direct pathing movement, not just a slow sprint. And this is just straight up damage reduction. It would usually monks have to use leg sweep in PvP to do damage, so it's just like an added bonus. But it does give you the option of using leg sweep potentially on defense in PvP. These ones are all pretty hard sells in PvE. It seems like you would really want to focus on soulbind conduits that get you as many potency, because these potency ones are nuts for just damage output. But regardless, the last point to get through here of the monk review for Shadowlands is going to be the legendaries. You're going to construct one of these, and then you can keep constructing them after that. So you may want to focus on one that's going to get you invited to groups the most initially, and then go for fun ones later on that could be kind of debatable on their performance. Fatal Touch, Touch of Death cooldown is reduced, so if you want to execute things that were already dead faster, you can. These are general monks, so all monks get Touch of Death, by the way. Could have cheeky usage, but right now it's not standing out too amazingly to me. Invoker's Delight, you gain 12% haste. This is a little bit buggy in terms of the text. Until canceled after summoning your Celestial. So when you call in Zwen, you get some haste. Or you get additional rolls. You can run that reduced roll cooldown, get another roll. They really like these legendaries for melee that are just, you get another leap, you get another roll, you get more fell rushes. You want to move? We're making you move more. And then there's no fourth general legendary slot. But that seems like this is like a general motif for melee. I feel bad for ranged DPS. Brewmaster, we're not looking into that. Mistweaver, we're not looking into that. Windwalker specific, so the Emperor's Capacitor, Chi Spender, decreases damage and correctly Jade Lightning by 100%, reduces cost by 5%, stacking up 20 times. Seems really good in PvE. Maybe depending on the damage in PvP. The main problem is that it's channeled, so in PvP, stopping channels is really easy. That's a big downside. Pressure release, whenever you deal damage to a target with Fists of Fury, you gain a stack of chi energy up to a maximum of 20. Using Expel Harm will cause the energy to detonate in a chi explosion. This is good for consistent AoE. Seems like it'd be really good in Mythic Plus trash pulls. Would be good in PvP. If you're playing cleave setups that Windwalker has pretty much been playing since the dawn of time. This one seems like a really good one overall. Like a first pick legendary if you want performance and some fun. That stands out to me. Rushing Tiger Palm. Tiger Palm now has a 4-yard range. It increases your critical strike chance by 25%. PvP, we don't care about crit. When used, you instantly dash to the target. The increased critical strike effect cannot occur more than once every 30 per target. They really want you to just move around and never let anybody get away. I mean, if you want to be an annoyance in PvP, this is 100% the way to do it. Performance-wise, it's not going to come close to that, so this might be something you go for fun later on. But yeah, I don't, in 2v2, if you're a 2v2 Windwalker player, I mean, that's a nightmare for healers. If they ever already is a nightmare trying to get away from you, now it's basically impossible. It's an unending nightmare. Zwen's Battle Gear. When Fist of Fury ends, the critical strike chance of your Rising Sun Kick is increased by 30% for 5 seconds. Rising Sun Kick critical strikes have a chance to reduce the cooldown of Fist of Fury. With that conduit that increases Fist of Fury damage, man, that's a really good one. To me, this one would be better in PvP than this kind of chi detonation, because this demands multiple targets, whereas Fist of Fury just always does good damage. So if you're more focused on PvP, I feel like Zwen's Battle Gear is probably what you'd want to go for. You're a little bit more focused on PvE than Pressure Release. If you're raiding, then maybe the Emperor's Capacitor. There's quite a few options in here. Only one of them is kind of like, yeah, you probably want to go for it later on. The rest of them seem to be very high value. And that's it for the Windwalker. We covered its baseline review. And of course, just remember, you're always going to get invited because you have 5% physical damage increase. So as long as physical damage dealers are sort of at the top in terms of performance, you're almost always going to get a raid spot. You're almost always going to get a dungeon spot because of that too. You've got good utility and good damage overall in the game. You're still retaining the playstyle from Battle for Azeroth with a couple of added bonuses. It seems like a solid pick. It seems like a spec that I would personally have a lot of fun of over a long period of time, so it's fitting the criteria really well for the tier list that I'm constructing. But I want to hear your thoughts. Leave comments down below what you think of the Windwalker Monk. Has it changed enough? Has it changed too much? Are you going to be playing it moving into Shadowlands? Please leave a comment down below. If you like the video, leave it with a like, and please subscribe to the channel, as it does help me out greatly, and it's absolutely for free. Just click the little subscribe button. You'll get notified when a video goes live, and I'm producing content every single day, so there's always going to be a video, and you want to know when it's out right away, so you can watch it on your break or watch it when you got nothing else to do. I mean, there's not really a lot to do right now if you're stuck at home like most people. I'm out here just trying to provide information and be a resource for you to make the correct decision for yourself moving into Shadowlands with what you want to play. So thank you again for watching, and we will see you in the next one.